Hi, good morning, and thanks for joining. I'm going to wait for another minute or so to let a couple more students join. But I'm going to keep in mind that we are starting a bit early, so we'll record this session as well, so that those who are not able to join can actually catch up with this particular session. So let's start with a brief introduction to what we are going to be looking at in the upcoming sessions for the NCFE functional skills in English. So what I would do is I'm going to do a bit of a narration and a bit of a walkthrough with regards to what is required to be done for preparation to take this particular exam. Let me start by introducing myself. My name is Raman Singh. People call me Ram in short, and I'm going to be your English teacher in terms of taking you through the functional skills reading and writing bit. Now, what you see on your screen right now is the Moodle platform, and I'm going to start off with that very briefly just to give you a bit of a quick demo. Just to make sure that you have logins to this and you're able to go into this system and obviously understand how to start looking at revising some of the topics which are there that we are also going to be touching up, in the sessions that we do. So today's session is more or less going to be a bit more introductory, but at the same time, I'm going to go into details of how you are going to be fully able to access the course, the system, myself in terms of any sort of query or help, and also the resources which are available, including practice test, reading material, and revision material. So let's start off very quickly with the NCFE functional skills in English level 2. This is the Moodle platform. This is a link to the platform where you'd be able to log in to the Moodle. So if you put your username in small letters, the password which has been sent across by Andy on the email, and then you click on this greater than arrow, you will be logged into the system. And under the courses as NCFE, if you click and go across to the reading or the writing section, that is what will take you into this particular course. Now, a good start would be to click on this button, Collapse All, which basically shows you all the content which you have to go through in terms of revision when you are looking at taking a particular exam. Now, if we look at the process that I would suggest that I'm going to take you through in the next 6 weeks to be able to revise reading and writing so that you're 100% confident. Mind you, I'm saying 100% because I'm that confident in terms of how I teach and how I share things with you that you'd be able to pass the exam the first time that you're able to, sit and take the test. But you'll have to follow my instructions to the core and obviously keep asking me questions, queries through the WhatsApp route so that it will allow you to, move along and complete the revision that I envisage that you would be requiring to do. So, what I would do is I'll just shift you over to the presentation because that is where we're going to do a bit of interaction today. So, the first thing is to be first thing that I would expect people in this particular course to be able to do is to be able to log in to Moodle. And this is the link to the Moodle platform. Now, once you're logged in, you're looking at the NCFE level 2 English and specifically, I'm going to put this in capitals, reading and writing sections because this is the place where you're going to be looking at revising everything. Now, if I go into the writing part of the exam, writing exam, couple of things. We don't want to go into a lot of details. We want to look at just the main parts that you would need to be looking at to focus on, your exam. Because I know a lot of you are adult learners. A lot of you are already speaking good English. You have good communication skills. Although in some cases it might not be your first language, but this is a language of communication that you use at your place of work, with maybe your family, kids at home, and all of the places that you interact. Say, for example, when I go shopping to Tesco or Sainsbury's or Aldi, I am using English, and when I'm at place of my work, I'm also still using English as a language of communication. So most of you have, I would say, good level of English speaking, listening, and communication. The writing and reading part is what we need to quickly revise because there's a certain set of terminology that you're required to use in the exam, and that is what would be useful to revise through Moodle platform because it'll tell you exactly what it means, what is the inference of that word or that question, and that would then allow you to answer it in a way that you are able to, score the marks. Now, the exam itself, will consist of two parts. And the reason I say two parts is because there are only two things which come in the reading exam. So when I say two parts, two things which come in the exam, one, you'd be asked to write a letter or an email. And the other part, so this is part one, and part two will be you'll be asked to write a article or a report. Now, it is very important for us to understand that these are the only two parts, and each of this part, the mark it carries is 22, 22 marks in total. So let me say 22 marks, and I am going to try and show you a sample test paper as well. Now, because what you have to keep in mind is because it is a writing exam, so you have to take care of spellings, grammar, your punctuation, and sentence construction. Because we are looking at a language exam, and language exam, as you can see, I had a spelling mistake in punctuation. If I have spelling mistakes, if I have something which is related to, the sentence not making sense, or in some cases, my grammar is not correct, then in that case, what will happen is I will lose marks on the, um, you know, um, I would say things that I've written in terms of the exam. So I am going to show you an online test. And as you would see, when we do start this particular test, this would essentially focus on, two aspects of it. The two aspects of it would be that it'll give you on-screen instructions very clearly that you have a practice exam, you have an actual exam that you're sitting, and when you're sitting the exam, what is happening is that the exam requires you to essentially ensure that you are able to complete these two tasks, which are writing an article or a report or writing a letter or an email. Now, this is a link which I will put down in the presentation as well. This is where you can actually, from your home, do a couple of practice tests, for the purposes of revision. And there are paper-based as well as online-based samples which are given here. Now, what you have to keep in mind is that we at the center only do what are called online exams. That means there'll be an exam that you'll sit essentially on the PC. And as you can see, there are some sample exams even here. When I click on this particular link, it'll launch the exact way the exam will run in the center, and it'll familiarize you also with the screen and the instructions and how the exam is served when you come down and obviously book it for the purposes of taking. Now, we won't go into the details of it, but I'm just visually showing so you have a sense of what you are expected when you are going to be completing the revision with me in the next 6 weeks on reading, writing, and speaking, listening. And that is when you would be looking at doing the exam. So as you can see, when I click on the exam, it says you're a person in the exam, all that stuff which is fine. It'll tell you very clearly what are the instructions on screen. And one of the instructions was that it did tell you, if I click on this again, sorry, I quickly clicked on it, that spellings, punctuation, and grammar part of it would be very, very important because that is where you're going to be scored on the exam. Now, when you look at this in particular, this is how the test will come. There'll be two activities. Part one, which is 22 marks for the article and 22 marks for email. Now, this can change. Some of you, when you are giving the exam, will, instead of an article, you could get a report. Or in some cases, when you're writing an exam, instead of an email, it'll ask you to write a letter. Now, what we need to be also knowing is what it'll give you some idea in terms of what is the content that you have to write. So there is a driving age and there is a workplace contact. These are the two contexts in which the article and the email will be asked to be written. So here is the first activity. You get a word editor on the screen, which is limited to a Word document, kind of a document when you use it on the Microsoft Office. It'll give you a bit of a scenario here which says the minimum driving age is 17. Some people, whatever it is given. But the key point here that we will bring into our slide is that your article will need to be having a certain minimum word limit, right? And that is the key point that we need to note. So in this case, it has to be 250 to 300 words. That means your typing speed, your way of looking at the scenario and then visualizing what you're going to write is all given on the screen. It is about forming a title which will say minimum driving age is 17. Some people think new drivers should not drive after dark. Write an article giving your views on whether the driving age should be lowered. So here, your heading will need to be formed, and I'll show you what you need to do at a later stage. You would need a heading, a subheading, and what are we looking at covering? These are the three paragraphs that we'll be writing to basically address what the article is all about. And towards the end, we'll make a conclusion. But all that has to be done between 250 and 350 words minimum. So if you write anything less than 250, you'd be looking at scoring less marks. If you write more than 250 but less than 350, you are in the range of being able to get full marks. And the next activity is an email. So as you can see, you get an email editor as you would normally get on when you use your Yahoo, Hotmail, Gmail. To in subject area, you copy this email from here, put this here, and then you have to, looking at the scenario which is given, you form an appropriate subject. And again, here, although the word count is not specified, but I would suggest that you are writing anywhere between 150 to 175 words. Anything less than, this would be penalizing you for the purposes of not being able to get full marks. Now, one part is I'm looking at scoring 100%. What is the minimum pass mark in the paper? The minimum pass mark in the paper is 60%. Because let's not forget that this is a GCSE equivalent English exam and you have four components to it. And these four components, you need to pass all of them to be able to, get your final certification. So I'll switch you back to the presentation. And if I look at the presentation, what I would want to be able to mention here is that reading, for example, forms 25% of your marks, writing 25% of the marks, and then speaking, listening, and communication, which is an exam that will happen in the center. This is like an open book exam, will form 50%. And when all of them are a pass, you will get a certificate from NCFE. And it's worthwhile for me to just to give that into a bit, put that into a bit of a perspective. How will your certification look like? Level 2 certificate. Let me also show you a certificate. How that would be, how is that certificate that you're going to be receiving and what it will say from a point of view of, having to having completed that, and then that would be a good point from a point of view of, you at least visually seeing it, that this is what I would be achieving at the end of it when I look at my certificate. So if I bring this over here as an example, this is how your certificate would look like. This would be a two-path certificate. It will say the title that you've achieved, and the second part of the certificate is going to be a transcript, and that transcript essentially, will say the three components that you have passed, and these three components that you have passed will be the reading, writing, and speaking and communication part of it. So just to give you a perspective of this is how your certification would look like when you complete all the components with us at the center. Now, going back here to the slide which I was mentioning. So what we are looking at is, this is a written test. What we want to be able to look at is familiarizing ourselves with what is an article. I would draw 4 slides. What is, a report? At least figuratively, we'll figure out what it looks like, how to write an email, and then what does a letter essentially look like, because visually it is important for me to understand what is going to be required when I write an article, in that particular exam. Now, when I look at this in particular, what we are specifically focused on as of now is looking at what is it that we're going to write and how does that visually essentially look, because when we are doing the exam, we are expected to essentially ensure that we are able to write what is expected, and show visually that this is what an article would look like, or this is what, essentially, your, let's say, the letter would be, or and the topic would be essentially given during the exam. So let's not worry about the topic, but that could change. And obviously, what we are looking at is a couple of things that we want to be able to understand on this. So when I look at article writing, I would primarily bring across a couple of things. And then at a later stage, what I would also be looking at in the sessions, giving you a visual idea of how the article essentially, looks like. Now, there are two parts to it which I want to make you understand. Visual today, it's not about looking at going into the details, but visually, if you look at how the article looks like, it basically has a bold headline. The article is definitely written by someone. It has a story which you are explaining, and the story has three parts to it. The writing of a story always starts with a beginning, it has the middle part, and then it has the ending part in terms of how you're going to be essentially, completing the part of, your article. Now, similarly, when I look at a letter, we are looking at a couple of things in terms of a letter, and let's look at visually how you would be looking at writing a letter. Now, a letter would typically be a couple of things again, and as you can see on your slide, visually, it has a date, it has a name and address, some greeting, opening paragraph, closing paragraph, and obviously, if you're writing a formal letter, it will have salutations like yours sincerely, faithfully, and then your name. And then you are actually also concluding towards the end what is it that you're wanting to write in the letter. So, how would we replicate this into, the exam is what we are going to be also looking at. Now, what I also want to quickly show you is an example of a report writing format. How does a report look like? What does a report consist of? And just visually again looking at where and what that part of the report essentially will be when I'm writing the report. So when I go into the report, here is how I would normally look at the report part of it. Now, the reason why we want to look at a particular example is because visually, if I know how I need to structure this out, I would be very, I would say, let's say, I would be very pleased with the fact that I know how the report is being written and how it visually looks like when I do read a report. And that is where the visual element part of it comes in, and it is quite important. So, if I look at an example of a report, as you can see, it has a title. Again, three parts to the report, which could be the beginning, the mid, and the end. And obviously, one of the things that we need to recognize when we do write a report is that report is normally a um, a collection of things that you're describing, which is already an event which has occurred in the past. That is why you're writing a report. You've witnessed the event, you've seen the event, or you've heard about it, and then you're writing it, and that is where actually the report has to be, visualized. So when we do look at writing the report, you're looking at a title, you have an introduction, you have a subheading, and towards the end you have a conclusion in the report, which is important because it could be an incident report, it could be an accident report, it could be a parent-teacher meeting report, it could be a meeting report, and those are the bits that you are actually writing, in that report. And the last part visually we want to look at is an email. The reason I want to look at an email is that the email tends to be something that we use on a daily basis. The email is something that we are very familiar with, but we also want to make sure that the email that we are writing is meeting the topic or the criteria which has been specified or asked for, in the exam. So again, visually, just looking at it visually today, this is how an email looks like when we do write it, using an editor which is given to us. And that is where, if you are familiar with the format, it will help you, write it well and compose it well. So what we are looking at today is just the visual part of it, to understand how much is too much to write, how much is too less, or what will be considered, necessary for our example, in terms of writing an email. And these are the things that we need to be looking at specifically for the purposes of, the activity specifically related to, writing, in terms of the activities that we are going to get. Now, last thing which I want to add today, in terms of how we are going to approach this, the writing part of the test, because I feel out of the three tests that you're going to take, the exam that are going to be, reading and writing and speaking and listening, one of the things which I also want to mention here today, because we've done a bit of a reading, bit of a discussion into how the tests would look like, how we will prepare. So the reading exam is a 4-part exam, and it has comprehension. That means you would read, a paragraph and then answer a few questions. Now, this is something which I want to just visually show, because I've shown the writing part of the exam. Let's look at a reading exam. So I click on this link, and what will happen is, this is how the exam would run. Now, the reading part of the exam, you have to keep in mind is that the reading is, you are actually introducing text which is being given to you in the comprehension, or in the, parts that have to be read, and from where you have to write the answers. So there are 3 sections to the exam. Each section will have small questions which are multiple choice questions, short text answer questions, and each section will essentially have some sort of a, information given. Now, what you're going to ideally see when you have this comprehension, one would be a web page or a forum. The second would be a letter or a article. And the reason I say this is because when I read, I have to prepare myself for doing the reading exam, because it is a paragraph that I have to read, or a page. And then basis this, you have to answer the short questions. So here it says, give one way the text one describes or says digital tickets benefit the environment. So I would need to look at quickly going through the article first, spend 5 minutes on it, and then basically, write the answers. So here, digital tickets, for example, save time, or save paper, or save the environment. There are various answers to it. Then you click on 2, go to the next question, third question, and so on and so forth. Then go to section 2. Now, when we go to section 2, is again going to have something, and as you can see, this is a blog post, or it is primarily again some sort of a write-up which has been given. You have to read it, and then you have to answer questions. Similarly, the third section here would be again something which is described, as a comprehension which is given to you, and you have to answer certain questions on it. Now, each of this section has marks. So essentially what you will say, and see, is that you are going to get in the exam these 3 parts which are going to come in some shape or form or the other. Now, switching you back just to the presentation very briefly, because what we want to do is look at the overview of it today. So when you look at the comprehension, when you look at the reading exam, there are 3 parts to the exam. There'll be comprehension which will come. It could be a web page, or a forum, or a blog, and in some cases it could be a letter, an article, and or it could be a newspaper article. Now, when you look at this, you need to be able to, how would I do and prepare for the exam? We are looking at reading the, spend 5 minutes in reading the article, blog, or the web page which is given, because you need to be able to get a very good hold of what information is given, and then answer questions related to the, say for example, the comprehension. So reading part of the exam is also a very simple exam. but we need to be able to prepare in terms of what terminology we will use, where and what things we will pick up. And these are things which are going to be very important from a point of view of visually understanding that these are required. Like, for example, this is a footnote, right? It is using, let's say, descriptive parts of the article, which is using visual elements. There's a picture given here, there's a headline given here. I can see that it is Lamborn email, a Lamborn mail, which is like a newspaper article. And then a newspaper article is written in a particular format. The writer or the journalist who's writing it is going to engage with you, ask open ended questions, put a bit of opinion. There'll be some opinions or some facts which are going to be backed up by research, which are going to be given in footnotes. If you look at the way the document is written, this is a blog post because there's a website link which is available. Blog posts would not be moderated. People could come in and write positive, negative comments, how they feel about it. Personal opinions will be there. So this particular part of the article or the comprehension is going to be opinionated. You could have people writing all sorts of things on it. The language would be informal because, as you can see, use of emojis is done. And in some cases you would see that this particular bit will not have any start and a big and an end. And then the first one was a website. The website is promoting its own services. There are lots of other tabs which are also given. And obviously, as you can see, there are bits and pieces related in the article which will be given as footnotes. There's further information. The language is going to be more formal. It is going to persuade you to take this service, and it is going to be more motivated or positive oriented. And these are the things that we are going to pick out in the comprehension because they will be coming across as questions here, and you'll be asked to write examples of where the article is saying this, or the post is saying this, or the forum is saying this. So those are the bits that you have to look at when we are going to be looking at preparing, for our English test. Now, going back to the presentation, so today's part, just to summarize, is to give you a glimpse of how you're going to be looking at, addressing and preparing with me for the next 6 weeks. So first thing, look at, being able to log into Moodle. You know how the exams are structured, what is the mark scheme in the exam. You're looking at how you essentially get your certificate, what each exam will consist of. I would say reading and writing are the simplest forms of the exam that you do, and essentially this is very, very important. Last thing which I want to include is the speaking, writing, listening exam. Now, this exam is an open book exam, right? You'd be given a topic and a topic question to prepare. You will have 2 weeks to prepare this. So before you come for the test to the center, you'll have 2 weeks to prepare. You can bring your notes, prints, or research that you have done to the exam. This exam will have two parts, right? First part will be a of presentation of the topic question you are given for a minimum of 10 to 12 minutes. Second part, and within that, you would also be doing question answers from other colleagues. So this is an open book exam with minimum 3 students. So you are going to be in a group of 3. So when you do your presentations, your other 2 colleagues who are in the exam will make notes of the presentation that you're making, and they can ask you questions towards the end of your presentation, and you need to be able to answer that part. The second part is what is called a group discussion. And the group discussion will happen between 3 students, minimum, as I would say. Maximum could be 5 students also on a particular day. So 3 to 5 students, I will mention, will do the exam at the same time. Here, this group discussion happens for a common topic, and the minimum time frame, time for this discussion is 7 to 10 minutes. Now, in this discussion, what will happen is you are all going to be looking at being given a common topic. This common topic, when you get, you are going to essentially use that particular topic to be able to discuss. Say, for example, the topic could be, we are talking about things like say, internet shopping. And when I do talk about internet shopping, for example, in this case, what will happen is that once you're given this topic, you would have a topic question. When you have a topic question, you would be essentially looking at preparing for it. You'll do your research, go onto Google, make some searches. Once you've done these searches, you would essentially write down and come back and obviously talk about what you have researched. I will show you very briefly how the topics would be sent across to you. Let's have a quick look. Okay, the other way, 1 second. And this is the last part which I want to show you today. So when I do look at the topics, what we are looking at essentially is this would be emailed to you. Got it right now. This is how the topic will be emailed to you. So this topic, for example, is saying mobile phones and their role in society. Each of you would have a scenario. There'll be a topic question which is released by NCFE, and that will be written in the middle. Now, this is the question on which you are required to prepare your presentation. So what I would do is essentially copy this particular bit here, go on to Google, and when I'm on to the Google, I primarily look at doing a quick search, of what all material is available on this. So how important is a mobile phone for entertainment and social media? If I write this out here, how important are mobile phones for social media and entertainment? And what I would do is primarily read a lot of stuff on the internet, because what I want to be able to do is I want to read a lot of stuff, because this is going to help me actually gather some material which is going to be relevant for my topic question that I need to present. So your presentation will essentially, you will maybe copy and paste this into a Word document, bring it along. And as I said, this is not going to be a memory test. You'll be able to use your notes that you have as cues, as cues when you are looking and making a presentation. Okay, I can't remember everything, but I'll look at the notes and I'll make a point. Then I'll look at the notes, I make a point. But before you start doing this, you would need to read about it so that these things can come to you quite naturally when you're essentially doing the test. You're not going to be taking a lot of pauses, but your presentation is going to be quite natural, because you have researched what the impact of use of mobile phones on social media and entertainment is, and you have enough points in your head. But sometimes you need cues. Okay, oh yeah, I need to also mention that this is an important point, or this is something which is there, and that would allow you to make that presentation for 10 to 12 minutes. The second part is going to be a group discussion, because the discussion has to be on a common topic. So your common topic will be the same, but it would be a different version of what is going to be discussed than the topic questions which have been given to you and the other learners for the purposes of the test. And this bit, you would be required to have a discussion between the three of you, or four of you, five of you, and towards the end of the discussion, you'll be either asked to talk about two positives or two negatives, or two advantages, two disadvantages, and one of you would take volunteer and obviously summarize the discussion on behalf of the learners. Because either you will all agree with what you have discussed, or towards the end you will not agree, and you would put your differences across, that okay, we've had a good discussion on this topic, but we tend to agree on this, we don't tend to agree on this, and that is where we would like to end the discussion. So you are going to be scored on the group discussion and on your presentation, and this is a file which is all recorded when the test happens, and is then shared with the external examiner. And the external examiner at some stage would then concur with the assessor or the invigilator who's actually doing the exam, and that is when you are seen that your communication is good, you're able to handle arguments, you're able to handle objections, you're able to answer questions, and that would allow us to make a judgment on your speaking, listening, and communication component. So this is an open book exam, very simple. Nobody fails this exam. You get the topic in advance, 2 weeks from us. You are preparing, researching the topic from the internet. You're bringing those research and your notes concised into 4 or 5 pages on that day for the exam, and that is what you're going to be using to make your presentations and to do and participate in the group discussions. So this, I hope, has given you an overview of how the English exam would run. would be sat, and obviously the aim here is to pass the exam. What I would do is in this particular introductory session, I've introduced the three sections of it, giving you some tips in terms of what is required and how we would now look at revising in the next 4 to 6 weeks all these topics so that you're confident to be able to, you know, come in and sit this exam and pass the exam the first time. Is that okay? Any questions on today's session? Any questions at your end? Okay, so if there are no questions, what I will do is I will close today's session and I will catch up with you same time next week. And that is when we will actually start, the revision by going into the topics which we have got on Moodle. And that revision that we will do will essentially be related to, looking at the topic list on starting with writing, then go to reading, and then go to speaking, listening, communication part of it. So thank you so much for attending, and I will see you next time. A copy of this recording, I will paste it in the group so that for those of you who haven't been able to attend today, would be able to get a copy of this particular presentation and the discussion and this particular session. And if you have any questions, feel free to drop me, quick text messages on the WhatsApp group, and I'll provide information, as much as possible on that. But we'll catch up at the next session next week. Take care, enjoy the rest of your Saturday, and bye for now.